Hey guys, welcome to this week's Devo from Out of Ashes Ministries. I hope your week is off to a great start. And hey, did you have a good weekend? Man, I sure hope so. I hope you had a fantastic weekend. I hope you got some downtime where you could just kind of relax and veg and decompress and kind of just take stock of things. And I hope you maybe did something you enjoy and hung out with people that you enjoy being with and just got refueled and refilled for the week that's coming up. And if you didn't get to do any of that this weekend, do yourself a favor and make plans the next weekend or in the next couple weekends to just take some time for you and like I said, just get refilled and refueled because the kingdom needs you. And this week, I hope, like I said, is off to a great start for you. So we're going to pick up this week from where we left off last week, starting kind of a new thought process in our Devos on being defined. And if you haven't watched last week's Devo, I'd really encourage you to do that. We're doing kind of a self-audit and a self-analysis. We're taking an inventory of how we define truth and how we define reality. And last week's Devo, I asked you a bunch of questions, or questions to ask you yourself, things that I've been asking myself as well. And I don't want to take time to repeat those, so go back and check that out if you haven't seen it. But basically, we're talking about what defines how we act, what we believe, how we react, how we treat our family and friends and people around us, how we live our lives, and how we process the things of life. And all of those questions, I hope, got you to kind of think about where you get your definition of truth from. And so this week we're going to move on and I want to talk about the power of a definition. Why is it so important, Joe, to go through this mental gymnastic? And why is it so important to think so hard about some of these things? Why do you do this? Well, I think it's so important because definitions are really powerful. And listen, this decision to live for God is supposed to be the most important decision we ever make, right? This is supposed to be the decision of our lives, and everything is supposed to become secondary. So my opinion and my passion is that if it's the most important decision of our lives, it deserves some thought, and it deserves some meditation and some analyzing and some thinking through in order to be pleasing to God and to get the most out of this life that we've chosen to live. So I want to do a little quick just exercise kind of thing. And does anybody know what this is? Have you ever seen one of these? Does anybody know what this is? It's about 2 inches long, maybe 1.5 inches. It's got a little kind of rubber washer thingy on it, gasket thingy. Does anybody know? Well, if you've ever put together an above ground swimming pool, then you've seen something that looks similar to this. This locks pieces of the frame together so that the pool doesn't fall apart. Sorry, I got a little tongue tied there. So that the pool doesn't fall apart. So it's a pin, right? Keeps the pool together, right? So if you didn't know what it was, you learned something new. How about this? Some of you will know what this is. Have you ever seen one of these before? Well, this is what I call a hinge, a gate hinge pin or post, or it's a technical name for it. I don't know what it is, but it's got coarse threads on one end, and it's got a post on the other end, and you screw this into a wooden post, and then you hang your gate hinges on it, and the gate swings open like that. So if you've never seen one of those before, now you know. And the last thing, does anybody know what this is? I'm sure you know what this is. If you said a screw, you were kind of right. But it's a particular kind of screw. It's a self-tapping sheet metal screw. And it's got a certain type of head on the top. And it's got a rubber washer around, or a rubber gasket around the washer here at the bottom. These are particularly used for screwing sheet metal or tin on a rooftop. And the rubber gasket is there to help seal off water. So what's so important about these things? So what is the big deal about this? What are you trying to do? Well, these things are all kind of similar shape and they kind of look similar. To me, they do anyway. Maybe it's just me that's weird, but they kind of look the same. The difference is in how we define them. Because here's the power of a definition. The power of definition is that it maximizes potential. Okay, I want you to follow me. You can't put an above ground swimming pool together with these little sheet metal screws. You could try, and it wouldn't work. Likewise, you couldn't put tin on a roof with a hinge pin like this, okay? The power of definition is that it maximizes the potential of whatever's being defined. Okay, and I know that might be kind of deep or kind of really like, wow, you're really out there, Joe, but I want you to follow me. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about perspective, particularly having to do with suffering. And that concept is so important because we need to understand how to process life. Life comes at us in all different forms and fashions, and things happen all the time. And how we process that has a lot to do with how we react. And so the understanding of perspective is really important because depending on how we look at something or from the place we look at something determines what it looks like to us. So if I'm standing on the ground, things look a certain way. But if I hop up on a ladder, or if I crawl up on the roof of my house, or if I go up an elevator into a tall building and begin looking, my perspective changes, and so things look differently. So we talked about suffering and how suffering looks differently depending on how we define it and what perspective we're looking at. So just like these objects, you get the most out of them when you know their definition and you know what they're used for. It's the same thing, guys, in the kingdom and living for God. Last week we read out of Isaiah chapter 5, verse 20, and God says, "Woe to them who call good evil and evil good, who exchange darkness for light and light for darkness, and bitter sweet and sweet bitter." What is God saying there? Woe to those, or be careful not to mix definitions. Be careful not to redefine things. Be careful that you keep what is good, good, and what is bad, bad. Know the difference, know the definition, know what good and bad look like, and make sure that you preserve that meaning. Make sure you know what light is and darkness is, and make sure that you preserve those things. Make sure for bitter and sweet. And you say, well, that's easy because those things are really super opposite. Well, is it really that easy? I mean, think about where we are today in our culture and our society. I think it is very safe to say that the lines are being blurred and skewed in a way that they maybe never have before. Maybe they have, but certainly maybe not in our lifetime, right? And so I think it's so important that we understand the power of a definition. And piggybacking off of last week, the question is, where do you get your definitions from? Now that we understand a little bit why it's so important to have the right definition, where do we get our definitions from? And so I want you to go back and think over last week's questions again. Now that hopefully maybe the scope of them and the focus of them make a little more sense. And think about it in light of, it's really important that we get our definitions right. I'll just throw this out to you kind of as a precursor to next week's Devo. Do you know that the Bible defines itself? The Bible itself is the best dictionary for itself. That makes sense. So when we're reading Scripture and when we're looking for truth in the Scripture, we have to be very careful not to put our own definitions on top of Scripture and to make it mean something that we think it means or that we want it to mean. We have to make sure to be very careful to let the Scripture define itself. So, where do you look for definitions for what's truth? Where do you look for a definition for what is reality? Now that you understand the power of those things, I want us next week to start to kind of dig through some Scripture and find out what, because what's the so what, right? Let's get down to it. The so what is this. You were created for a purpose. You were created with a specific call in mind. Your job on this earth as a believer is to make His name great and to expand the borders of His kingdom. That is your job and my job. That is our purpose. And if we are defined incorrectly, then we will never reach the full potential of what we're supposed to be doing. We'll never hit our stride. We'll never get in our groove. We'll never be confident in the calling that God has given us. Don't you want to be confident in God's calling? Just like these simple little illustrations. If we are misdefined, or if we're not defined in the right way, we will never be used for the right purpose. And secondly, if we don't learn to define the things around us and see life for what it is, then the circumstances of life can never have their full impact and reach their potential that the Father has in our lives if we don't define them correctly. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense, and I hope I'm communicating what I'm feeling in my heart and what I'm sensing. I want us to be able to start putting things in order from a biblical standpoint so that we can be confident in who we are, we can be confident in who our God is, and we can be confident in the way that He deals with us in this life so that we can move forward. We can become the ministry that we need to be unto the lost and unto our brothers and sisters, and that so we can strengthen His kingdom one life at a time. So I hope this blesses you this week. I hope it challenges you to think. I hope it boggles your mind a little bit, and I hope it really encourages you to really get alone and think about some of these things. Listen, my goal is to strengthen you. We love you, and we want to make sure that you are as strong in Messiah as you possibly can be. So get in the Word, get in prayer, get with other believers this week, and be encouraged and be strengthened and be more like Him. We'll catch you next week as we continue on with our Being Defined series. I hope to see you there.